So we directly move on to a presentation about the Foodsecure project. I think the coordinator Alberto asked me to tell a little bit about the project and also to focus on the long-term drivers. In this project we have also a focus on short-term, but I left that out for all the other experts here in the room. I think we deal especially with short and long-run development of food and nutrition security. We talk here a lot about food security. We try to make there also a next step to nutrition security by bringing all kind of nutrition inside the models. What's quite a big challenge. So if we look now at the big world 2050 food equation, there's a lot of risks. I think there's already a lot of repetition with some maybe some of the other. But in principle, on the supply side, we talked only a little bit about land and the degradation. Water scarcity, how big will it be? Will be depending also on climate change. In principle, this third point, it's not emphasized so much, is productivity and technology. I will focus on the long-term drivers, maybe a little bit more on this part. I think it's also not stressed a lot by the others. We know a little bit of farm and labor and farm structure, and the other thing I will talk also a little bit is about climate change. On the demand side, we know a little bit about population growth and income growth, poverty, but in principle, consumer behavior might change because of all kind of sustainability behavior, at least in Europe. Waste is quite a big issue, and I think we also talked about bioenergy. The last speaker said it's not about, let's see, because it can not only be biofuel, but bioenergy, biochemicals, the whole bioeconomy that's coming up in the EU, and where does it lead us? On the trade and markets, we know the role of supermarkets quite a bit, protection, but the big question marks are financial markets and food stocks. I think we heard already quite a bit of that today. So our project is also really about reducing hunger. It's food security, it's food access, food availability, food access, utilization and stabilization. But if you go to 2030 by hunger, then on global you see that if you go to the indicator of malnourishment, it's going down over time, and there's not a big jump because of the high prices. This is because especially in Asia, especially China, it reduced a lot. But if we look at Africa, there we see that the last couple of years we have a problem because the high population growth, poverty, and the food price inflation. On the other hand, in this whole picture, we have to take into account to deal with ecosystems, because in the long run, they will also have an impact on the food system. The tea, I think it's already in a lot of, we have a lot of teas. With tea is important. If you go to childhood, very early childhood, then weeks, days is quite important for nutrition and shocks. Nutrient deficiency, then often the months is interesting. And if you go to stunting, nutritional status, then more decades of year are important. If you go to the markets, in principle we have to balance the short and the long-term actions. On the long term, we have the water and land issues, climate change, political change, and all kind of investments. What might have an effect? Because high prices now can induce investments that reduce problems later. On the short run, we have the weather, the risks, the grain stocks, the trade shocks, because of all kind of trade policies, as mentioned before. And yeah, and then we have the commodity and the financial markets. Our project, just to give a little bit background, it's in principle we are a little bit. I think it's a brother or sister project of ULYSSES. Is what we try to do is design effective and sustainable strategies for assessing and addressing challenges of food and nutrition security. So it's looking more at the nutrition side. We want to make a toolbox that helps policymakers to make better policies and better coordinations. Because food and nutrition security, you have many policies, agriculture policies, energy policies, development aid policies that all work on the same field, but there's no coordination. And maybe we try to give some tools that can be more coordinated. We are here especially for EU policymakers like TASSERS and a lot of other here in the room. Yeah, how can they make better policies for also from a food nutrition perspective? It's quite a big team. 19 teams we have, 8 billion, and it runs for 5 years. So we have now 2 years left, of 2 years done, so we have 3 years left. So we are more in a phase of having the concepts, and now we go to the empirical part. We do it for the Commission, for the Parliament, and regional organizations in developing countries. We have a lot of institutes, among others, the coordination is this team. I'm Hans van Meijl from the Meijl.Wageningen University. We have Joachim van Braun from ZEF, we have Maximo Torero and David Laborde from IFPRI, Joost Willem from Leuven, and Jean-Christophe Bureau. We have many people. Picture says some more. You see Aleko standing there, big in the front. We have also Robert McBarrak. So we had one in The Hague, and the other one was recently in Addis in Ethiopia. So we have a lot of interaction. We try also with African stakeholders. Our main concept, in principle, we start from the determinants on the supply and demand side. So we are now in a phase of really trying to understand the determinants on the supply side. We look at yields, farm structures, water availability, land, and all these kind of things. And in the other side, we look at the demand side, population, preference shifts, and also the whole energy debate. Then we see what it means for food and nutrition security. In principle, the current models we have can say something about market prices, but they don't say a lot about food and nutrition security, because then you have to go to the household level. You have to know something about a household type, what is the income of the household, and whether he spends his money on. High prices are good for farmers or some producers, except when they are net buyers, as we heard tomorrow. But they can be good or bad for consumers. So we have the models to predict you the future, because we want to go to long-term solutions, and then see what, if you have all kind of indicators, can you help something with guidance? We have quite a big toolbox with kind of the leading models in the world, like the Mirage and an impact model of IFPRI, the GlobalIM model of IASA, our magnet model of the Wageningen University. And we try to improve that and link that to all kind of household models. So we are now in a phase of quantifying the determinants. We have two big blocks. The one is on price volatility, and the other one is on long-term modeling. Today, I look a little bit more in the long-term modeling, and then we're going to the guidance. So what are current insights on this debate? On the one hand, it's not very surprising, but it's very that food security in the long run, income levels matters a great deal. So the higher the income, the lower the level of food efficiency. But you have to think about inclusive growth. If you go to the household individual level, it's sometimes not so clear. The composition and distribution of GDP growth matters a lot. The quality of governments, health and education services matters a lot. You have some countries who have a high GDP growth, but the poverty stays high, as in this case we see here in India. Some countries have GDP growth and get a large reduction in hunger, others don't. So then a lot of the government aspects are really critical for this area. I think this, I have hardly to mention key drivers: economic growth, structural evolution of consumption, agriculture factor markets, maybe not mention so much water, land, and the structure, and technology. Technology, availability, adoption, legislations. I think Harald was just mentioned is that technology will be bad in the future. I think we have to see. All kind of structural drivers. Structural drivers, we make a big difference between at the individual household level, where the income matters a lot. What are the drivers of income, including prices? Because prices for the farmers are a big part, but also if you have own land, what is doing with the land values? Also the price for the food, but also the non-food matters a lot, because it's about disposable income, if you talk about food access. Sanitary conditions, education, and transaction and market access costs. Prices, I think we talk a lot here about prices, so we look at demand, supply, and the markets. I don't dig deep into. But the point I want to stress in this and focus in this presentation on is, in principle, look a bit more about agricultural growth. If you look at agricultural growth, where it's coming from, in the past it was a lot about, especially about input intensifications. The Green Revolution using much more inputs, and it is quite changing a lot. It's now, if you look at the area expansion, it's little, the intensification is little, but the main part is total factor productivity growth. TFP growth, if you go to food prices and agriculture, it's not yields is the key, but it's labor productivity. It's often neglected in the whole debate, but we have some evidence that it might be quite interesting. So, some long-term trends in agricultural market. This is a study I'm going to talk about that we did together with some other groups. If you go to scenarios, scenarios are just, they are not predictions. You cannot say the one is better than the other. It's just alternative views on the future. But they are useful to test policies, to see whether you have no regret policies and these kind of things. So if you look at the scenario studies over the last couple of years, there were many by IFPRI, by FAO, by all. And if you see the food projections, they are all over the place. And I think this is, for our profession as economists, and certainly as a modeler myself, it's not so nice because, what do you contribute to the whole policy debate? So one of the things we do now at the beginning of the project, we are really looking in where are these differences coming from? So why are our model projections so different? And this is not different projections in prices, but it's everywhere. It's food supply, food prices, non-food prices, household income. It's all over the place. So we try to understand where the difference is coming from. Studies are little comparable because they have different assumptions, different guidance, whatever. So we made a project together to get a more comparable, well-designed scenarios. We tried as good as possible, and we did that together with the Agmipl team, with OECD, with Martin van Lampen, Frank van Tongeren, Jerry Nelson of Agmipl, and our Foodsecure team, where the modelers of Meijl.Wageningen, YASA, IFPRI, and PBL participated. So it's not probability, I cannot repeat it again, but it's plausibility. We defined quite some scenarios to have an idea why are these models different and why are they producing different results. We used whatever scenario, but we came to a reference scenario, middle of the road scenario, SSP2 of the IPCC. So what we did is we first of all harmonized population and GDP growth across the models. We also harmonized, because it's a big thing in the debate, it's land productivity. We took it from the impact model, and it was coming from all kind of very fancy climate change models. We used present-day climate, and we used constant oil prices. So what did we get? It's quite interesting. I think it's hard to read probably, but I think it was about 9 or 10 models. It's next to the models we use in Foodsecure. We have all kind of climate change models of the Japanese, of AIM. PIC, Potsdam did also. And what we see is that at the beginning we had an enormous difference by declining prices and other double prices. So not all people agree that it's over the trend of declining real prices. There are still 3 models that say in 2050 we have to see whether the real prices go up or go down. This is a question mark, but it's a question, why are some models saying that real prices go down and others increase? I think the bandwidth we got at the end of this exercise is actually, for me, was surprisingly low. 40% higher or 50% lower, because when we started it was much higher. So uniform GDP population assumption, other assumption helps. And also during the process, the biggest mistakes in the models were taken out. You can learn a lot from each other. So expert seeks consensus. It's plus 40 to minus 5, so it's not a big increase, not a big decrease. Range narrower than early comparisons. I will say a little bit about differences. A very important difference came about this, what do you assume about labor productivity? We all talk about yield, but we let loose the labor productivity. It matters quite a big deal, especially in the more general equilibrium models, because labor productivity, a large part of, if you go to the remuneration for production factors, is for labor cost. If you can save labor, costs can go down, and this will have an impact, of course, on food prices. Different assumptions over there make quite a big difference. But there is also a big disagreement how much suitable land there is in the world and how easy it is to take it into production. This is a big trade-off. If you have a lot of land available, these models, or can make it available in 2050, these models get to lower prices. The short and the long run substitution possibility is also a big thing. Short run, in the long run, a lot of people have more substitution possibilities. And then if a price gets high, you substitute away of it, and you substitute away for the problem. Income elasticity was an issue, but not the biggest issue. I showed this because if you compare one scenario, the middle of the road scenario, SSP2 with SSP3, don't look into the SSP3 gives lower GDP growth, higher population growth. And we get two models that have quite a different impact than the others. And I don't look at the figures exactly, but the main thing was here, what do you expect if GDP is higher? What does happen with labor productivity in agriculture? A lot of models kept it the same, so the same in one scenario, the other. Other have a kind of reasoning behind that if the GDP is lower, then also, because GDP is made of productivity of all factors, then also the GDP, for example, agriculture has to be lower. This was the main explanation. So what you assume on labor productivity, whether the prices will go up or down. Because if you have lower productivity, lower GDP, lower productivity, it means higher prices. So the two models with higher prices have endogenous tech change. So if you endogenize tech change in your model, you get a totally different effect than when you have exogenous to your model. Climate change, also an issue. There was at least one agreement between the models. If you have a climate change, this was a very bad climate change scenario, in the sense that, I'm not an expert, but in principle, we get quite high temperature and there was no mitigation and adaptation, and we get price increases all over the place, but they were quite different. From the CCAM model was only about 5% to about 80% of the PIC model. So the sign was the same, at least, but the differences were quite big all over the place. So some of the conclusions. Sectoral labor productivity paths have a major impact. Should not be neglected when you look at the future. What are the possibilities over there? And quite important is, it's not only this labor productivity, but the labor productivity in agriculture relative to the other sectors. Because the average wage levels, of course we have segmented markets, but in the long run, farmers want also to have quite a good income. So what is the labor productivity in agricultural sector versus the rest of the economy? If the rest of the economy, agriculture in the past, it was much higher than in the rest of the economy. You had an inelastic demand, you get real prices. So the key thing is, what's going to do productivity? And not all experts agree on that part of the puzzle. And this is where we have to look further into that, because the modeling of tech change was the big difference between our results. So we have to open this black box, because there are many approaches. We don't know which one is better. We don't know. So we have to also go to more, if we can, to go more model testing and, if possible, validation, if we can find that one method is more superior than another one. Then also the model type determines flexibility in supply and demand. In general, was not always the case. PE models, partial equilibrium models, are a little bit less flexible, and therefore they get higher price responses in their models than general equilibrium models, where you have more substitution possibilities between capital and labor. Another number of other where we really have to look into representation of technological change, but also representation of land use. Can we have more convergence in how much land is available in the world, how much land can be taken into production, and the representation of trade? I don't think that was the biggest issue. Now, I don't say too much about this, but in the fall we have also a kind of session like this in the commission, and then we have all kind of other meetings coming up. Yeah, and
1 minute.
Yeah, I will stop here, because we work together with a lot of institutes. It's a very difficult area, so it might also be a nice way to cooperate with this project, but then maybe also especially on the short-term side. I think Matthias from ZEF is there, so he can also maybe ask if you have some questions about the short-term work. You can also talk with Matthias. Thank you.